Welcome back to the Keri Report. We've all seen the headlines: eat this for sharper focus, avoid that to prevent memory loss. But what's actually backed by science? This topic hits close to home for me. My 91-year-old mom has dementia, so I know just how important brain health is, especially as we age. And let's be honest, anti-aging isn't just about wrinkles, though I wouldn't mind a little less of those either. In this episode, we're diving into the real connection between diet, lifestyle, and cognitive health. From daily habits to overhyped supplements, I'm breaking down what really matters when it comes to keeping our brains sharp. Stay tuned. Joining me today is the amazing Maggie Moon, an award-winning brain health nutrition expert and best-selling author who promotes person-first diet and lifestyle medicine for cognitive and mental health. She's the author of a new book, The Mind Diet, second edition. Yes, there was a first wonderful edition. Now there's a second. Maggie serves as a strategic advisor to global brands, commodities, government agencies, nonprofits, and late-stage startups. Welcome, Maggie.
Oh, hey, Keri. Thanks for having me. This is my favorite topic to talk about.
I figured as much, considering you did write The Mind Diet. That was a little bit of a hint. I'm like, if I want to talk about brain and nutrition, I'm going to talk to Maggie Moon. So thank you for joining me. All right. You know what? I think we just dive right in. You good with that?
Sounds good. Let's
do
it.
So let's start with the basics. For those who don't know your book or anything about it, what exactly is the mind? And I'm going to spell it M-I-N-D, just like we think, the Mind Diet.
Well, great question. And I think what most people should be taking away is that the Mind Diet is exactly what it sounds like. It is the foods that we want to eat to nourish and protect our brain health. However, technically, it's this long acronym that we don't have to worry about, but I will say it once.
Okay.
It stands for the Mediterranean Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension, Intervention for Neurodegenerative Delay. That's the mind of it all. And we will just call it the Mind Diet.
I do think it's easier because now already all I got out of that was Mediterranean something, something, something.
Something.
But what I love about that is, so then is it similar to what people are more familiar with is the Mediterranean diet?
Well, exactly. So it's taking pieces of heart healthy diets from the Mediterranean and heart health recommendations in the US that many people are familiar with, but then it's been optimized for brain health. So that's the real difference. Small changes here and there that are really going to be essential for brain health.
Right. So supercharged to focus on brain health. All right. I love that.
Focus. That's a good word for that. Focus.
Focus. All right. What do we know about, and I know you and I on the same page, scientific research? I mean, here's the key here. There's so much chatter out there about brain health and aging, but what does the scientific research tell us about how diet may delay? Because I think as we get older, cognitively, we're all going to lose it a little. And I say lose it, I mean, I'm saying that as a loose term. And especially if there's any specific research that points to Alzheimer's or dementia.
Well, the initial Mind Diet research that came out was several years in the making, and it's at this point over a decade in being established. So it came out in 2015, and those two large, pretty landmark studies showed that following the Mind Diet could cut the risk of Alzheimer's dementia by half, by up to 53%. And slow down age-related cognitive decline, some of that losing it that you just talked about, by up to 7.5 years, simply by following this really reasonable dietary pattern that was going to be good for heart health and brain health anyway. And what I love about this is that it's so accessible and it's so reasonable. And at this point, it is the best researched dietary pattern for brain health around the world.
Okay, so I want to back up for a moment. You said when it came, because I'm obviously, you know, my interest in dementia. what was the percentage? 50%, did you say?
Up to 53%.
Wow.
So cutting that risk in half, and obviously preserving brain health is more than just diet. There are other factors, but
Right.
yes,
And we're probably going to
yes,
get to that if we have time.
yes,
Now,
yes.
could you briefly, just for my listeners who are curious about, I mean, this is all about cognition, but also curious about the Alzheimer's dementia component. What's the difference? Like, what is Alzheimer's versus what is dementia?
Sure. So dementia is the umbrella term for these cognitive deficits that make
Okay.
our daily living challenging, making it hard to remember how things work, maybe where we are in a neighborhood. Alzheimer's is a specific kind of dementia, and it is
Okay.
the most common type of dementia around the
Okay.
world and in the US.
Okay.
Mhm.
So when we basically, to cover it as a broad statement, we could just say dementia because that incorporates Alzheimer's and other brain related cognitive degenerative diseases.
Yeah, I think that is pretty fair. And of course, there's always going to be
Oh,
exceptions, but that's
right.
the scientist in
Yes.
me. So yes,
No, there's always, as I like to say, there's a zillion PSs. Okay. And,
yes.
even when we look at a lot of these studies, I'm sure there are a couple of PSs as well. So, from this research, I am sure that since we're talking diet here, and these were studies on diet, were there specific nutrients that were the stars, the ones that were like, okay, eat more of these, and this will help decrease X amount or support X amount, or maybe there's no X amount, but that's overall been found to be extremely helpful?
Well, the way that the Mind Diet was created was based on certain foods and certain nutrients, and what the research so far had showed us was going to be optimal for protecting brain function. So it was a combination of nutrients and foods coming together. So I think that something like omega 3s, we know that that is literally part of the structure of brain cells, and it helps protect neurons so that information can flow freely. We know that a whole host of B vitamins work together to lower some compounds that we know are, when they get too high, can be kind of toxic to brain function. So, yes, vitamins C and E are such powerful antioxidants, and that helps protect the brain because there's so much oxygen and
Right.
oxidation going on through just normal metabolism.
So, what of all of these nutrients that you mentioned have in common, in my mind, no pun intended, is that they're anti-inflammatory. They have benefits to decrease inflammation in the body. So, would that be fair to say that foods that can decrease inflammation are really would be the ones that we should look for when thinking about brain health?
I think that that is so smart, and that is absolutely a way to think about it. If that helps people to kind of understand it, it's certainly one of the leading theories of the underlying, what is going on systemically is that chronic inflammation. So that is spot on. And I believe that in France, their version of the Mind Diet, they looked at overall inflammatory load. And then we've also seen data on overall dietary inflammatory index. And the lower that is, so the lower the inflammation, the better, and the lower the risk for dementia is.
Right. Now, when we look at backing up for a moment, let's look at the omega 3s. Was there any difference found in whether those omega 3s are coming from, let's say, seafood versus plant based? Plant based meaning, nuts and seeds that are known to
Mhm.
have omega 3s. Is there a difference?
Mhm.
And was there a certain amount that was shown that we should be ingesting? Because it's one thing to say have more of, but what does more of
Right.
really mean?
Yeah. Well, this is interesting because we technically, as you know, we technically only need the plant-based omega-3 ALA that comes from walnuts and chia and flaxseed, but the conversion to that EPA and DHA type of omega-3 that comes from algae and seaweed and fish is not so hot, and that's why we recommend eating fish. However, both are actually really valuable, and what we know is that ALA, this science is really emerging and changing the way we think about ALA. I feel like the old, what we thought of was EPA, DHA, get it from fish. And
Right.
then if you can, add a little bit of ALA. But there's new data showing that ALA itself could be really effective in helping our brain metabolize glucose better, which is just a fancy way of saying that our brain can use the energy that we provide it. And it's very energy intensive. It's kind of a gas guzzler for energy. So if we can better metabolize glucose, that is good. I also want to mention that signs of glucose metabolism often show up in the brain decades before symptoms of dementia might show up. So in our 30s and our 40s, maybe we want that to be better, and it could be an early sign and also an early prevention target
Wait,
for preventing
how will we
dementia later.
know? Wait, so you're saying, because again, I'm also so about prevention, obviously, and it's never too late, is what I want to remind myself. So
Yes.
you said glucose. Wait, what are we measuring? Back up for that too. So, what
Yes.
can somebody in their 30s and 40s measure to say, okay, we need to improve, and then know what they should do to improve to help decrease a decline that might be happening?
While we're measuring levels of insulin resistance,
Okay.
which we can measure kind of on a systemic level. So we don't necessarily have to go into the brain, but maybe that can be a good proxy for that. Right now, this is pretty cutting edge research that has
Okay.
come out in the last year or so. So
Wow.
this might be a potential for us to put more into clinical practice in the coming years.
Okay.
But I think at the end of the day, eat a variety, get the plant-based, get the marine-based, and you will be on the right track. I do want to share that for the Mind diet, it really only recommends fish at least once a week versus the American Heart Association's twice a week, because that is the level at which we saw that it would protect the brain against dementia.
Wait, just
Mm,
one serving of fish a week?
correct. That's all you need to do at a minimum, which I think makes it
At a,
more accessible for people.
yes. I mean, that seems to me so doable. I I guess it's going back to, I know we started this discussion like Mind Diet and the M stand for Mediterranean. So I'm still wondering where the difference is. Is the Mediterranean diet, and I know we said it's like supercharged, but yet if it's only recommending one serving of fish at a minimum a week, that doesn't seem very supercharged to me. So I'm expecting to hear you tell me I need to do more of X, Y, or Z, not kind of what I'm already doing.
Yeah, well, I would say rather than supercharged meaning more, 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 I would say optimized.
Okay, I
So,
like that
what
word.
do we know? What do we know about what will actually move the needle for brain health? And that's where the recommendation for once a week came from.
Okay.
However, of course, more,
Right, because there's also
other guidelines are great.
right, and there's other benefits.
Other benefits.
We're sitting here
Totally.
talking mind, but I mean, so many of these foods also huge cardiovascular benefit. So there's like many other
100%.
benefits. I mean, it's kind of
Yes.
like we really don't even like to recommend nutrients. We like to recommend foods because
Yes.
foods have so many different components. It's almost like
Yes.
when we recommend that food, we also, it's hard to just recommend it for one health benefit because usually it has a lot of health benefits.
My goodness, guess what? The whole body, it's all
Oh
connected.
my
So,
God. Is
absolutely.
it? Oh my God, Maggie. I did not know that.
I mean, I love these like side effects, right? The
Right.
positive side effects are going to be an overall boost in wellness. And
Yes.
by the way, a lot of data on improved mental health as well. It's the same organ
Well, that
for
totally
for
makes
both.
sense, right? All right.
Yes.
So, we're going to encourage of these plant-based, these omega-3s, more B vitamins, more vitamin C, E, all the antioxidants. And not that I ever like to tell people the don't do, because
Mm.
I don't like don't. But P.S. No. What foods should people avoid but limit in their diet
Yeah.
if they are concerned about which, and I almost hate to say if because I think we all should be, but I'll stick with if. If you're concerned about cognitive health and aging, are there specific foods that you should be like, I gotta lower those in my diet? I'm eating too
Mhm.
many of them presently.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
tell
and
me.
I love the way that you frame that question, and I think we are so aligned on that. These are foods to limit, not eliminate, and it is all about changing up that balance of how much of these foods? So let me just get to it. So we're going to want to limit solid fats like butter, margarine, coconut oil is in there. We're going to want to limit full fat cheese. We're going to want to limit processed meats. We're going to want to limit fried foods and also pastries and sweets. And all of that is designed to reduce the load of saturated fat as well as added sugar, and what those do to raise overall inflammation and some dysfunction. Just for example, we know that excessive saturated fat damages the blood-brain barrier, and you don't want to be weakening your gatekeeper into your precious brain. So, just as an example, so we just want to limit, and it's not eliminate at all.
Okay. So we're eliminating not people's favorite foods. But as I also like to say, it's just focusing on what you should eat more of, not what you should
Yes,
eat less of. So
correct.
obviously, if anyone again has a diet that's high in saturated fats and added sugar and added sodium, we're going to need to look at their total diet and say, what are you doing? Because that's probably not a great idea for the entire body as well. When you said processed meats, just for my listener, clarify what those foods are.
So this may be like a bacon or a sausage, something that has been aged and where the sodium has been really focused and
Okay.
those kinds of foods.
Those kind of foods. And fried, does it matter how it's fried or any kind of deep frying is basically what you're saying?
The idea is we want to limit any kind of frying, especially fried fast food. But again, even in the dietary pattern of the Mayan diet, where some of these foods were still eaten somewhat, they still saw protection if they kept it under a certain limit. Like, cheese, maybe once every couple weeks,
Okay.
less rather than every day. So it's like that. They can still eat these foods,
Right.
just
Now, in
changing the balance.
in this research, I'm just curious now. Were they isolating for other lifestyle factors? Because I can't help but think we're talking, all about this food, which obviously all on board with. But what about exercise? What about sleep? What about family history of dementia? Other factors? How did that play into all this research?
Right. So researchers do try to control for as much of that as possible, of course, but individual cases will vary. At this point, what is comforting to me as a nutrition scientist is that we've got observational data, we have clinical trials, so we have the range. We've got animal study data, cell data, we've got the range of research and over 200 studies on the
Wow.
mind diet. And
Oh,
so we can
oh my
see that,
God, Maggie, I didn't real,
yes.
that's a lot. I love that.
Well, yes, and I read them all so I could update my book. So we've got this large body of research. Well, it was only 150 when I had updated the book, but since then it's now up to 200 plus.
Still impressive. Let me just,
Yes.
very impressive. Okay.
Thank you. But that amount of research, we want to look at overall the direction it's going. And overall, the direction it's going shows that there are benefits for global cognition and delaying cognitive decline and certainly reducing the risk of dementias. So I think that's what you want to look at is that whole big picture, whether or not each study controls for X, Y, or Z. But to your point about other lifestyle factors, what I want to share with your listeners, very doable. So there's a group globally, it's called the Global Council for Brain Health, and they have come out with the 6 pillars of brain health. And this is what I want to share. We can do this every day. Eat well, we've already talked about that.
Yep.
Move more. Exercise increases brain cell activity and new brain cells growth. We want to sleep soundly. That's when the cleanup crew comes in and takes out the metabolic
Yeah.
waste from the brain from the day so that we can cement those memories. So we've got eat well, move more, sleep soundly, managing stress. A stable schedule can help. Meal planning, hello, just to bring it back to nutrition. Then we've got engaging the brain, novelty, learning something new. And I love this one. Ready? Cooking is an advanced cognitive task. So you plan for
Interesting.
it, you multitask as you prep a recipe. It is using a lot of executive function. Maybe you have to substitute an ingredient, you got to use sound judgment. So cooking is actually an advanced cognitive task. That's exciting. And the last one is nourishing those positive interactions, whether it's with friends and loved ones or just someone you're
I
interacting with
yeah.
casually.
I was just going to think because I'm sitting here thinking social interaction, I think, is probably very important as you age. Did this research, what ages did they look at though? So, also, like, at what point do we start measuring? I'm sorry. Can I help you with something? Cooper wanted to say something, everyone. He's like, I'm not so sure this has to do with me. Okay, it has to do with, I think dogs. My last dog, I swore had doggy dementia. Anyway, and when he was 15. But okay,
Oh,
back to humans. So where was I? I was on social. Oh, I know, on age. So at what
yes.
point do which at what point does a decline actually begin if it's going to begin? And at what
Well, mhm,
point is it measured then that it was able to kind of delay it, if that makes sense?
it does. So the original research was in older adults. So we're generally talking about the 65 plus. And
Okay.
this is also when risk tends to go up quite dramatically over time. That was the original research. However, since then, we have research, quite a bit of research in middle age. So anywhere from 30 to 50, I would
Okay.
say. We've got good data in that age range. And there's even a smaller amount of data in children and adolescents
Wow.
because people are interested in it at all
Yes.
ages. But
Interesting.
yeah, so I would say that we really, what's become clear is that midlife is a crucial time to be really cementing these healthy eating habits because by the time you see symptoms, it might be decades of
Right.
buildup of poor eating habits that are
Yes.
now just showing up.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So people are going to want to do those six pillars. Well, this is what we're recommending. What about
Mhm,
supplements? I swear that
mhm.
people, that's like they're hearing this and they're also going to be like, well, if I could take a supplement, what should I do? Is that worth taking? I mean, I have my own personal opinion on that. I'm very curious what you think are supplements needed. If so, which are? And then let's discuss which might not have the research to support it. So let's actually start with the ones that probably are a waste of money. Let's start there.
Yeah, honestly, most of them fall in that category, and I would love to hear your opinion too. Most of the large, credible institutions, they don't really recommend any of these supplements that are being marketed. I think that it's uh, interesting, the science that they're presenting, and maybe we will find out something down the line. But right now, we just don't have very good data. The only thing that we really have robust, multi-year, large-scale data on is a simple multivitamin that was studied in the
Interesting.
Cosmos trial. Yeah,
Okay.
it tends to keep your brain like 2 to 3 years younger cognitively. So that is just a Centrum Silver, which you can find
Yeah.
anywhere. And
And that's the
by the
one
way,
I actually, were you at that luncheon? I went to a luncheon on that at Fancy. I think it was last year. And since then I've been taking one. But obviously
oh, amazing.
I couldn't remember. No, I'm kidding. But yeah,
Ah,
I started taking one then because I heard the research coming out of that study and I was
mhm,
like, that's it. Multivitamin every day, Centrum Silver.
yeah. And
Well,
since that research has come out, I've started working with the Centrum brand, so I just want to disclose that. But it's they were not involved in the research at all. They just provided the product, and it's a
yes.
very well done study.
What about, because I've done an episode on it and I kind of heard a lot of the science. What about lion's mane? Because that's the one that I've been hearing of everything I've heard about and read about. And lion's mane, for those who don't know, is a mushroom, not a psychedelic mushroom. But I
Right.
feel like that it seemed very promising what they were saying about it. What have you read?
Yeah, so the thing is that on a lot of these supplements, there's biological plausibility. Like there's a reason that it probably should work. We just don't have the data to be for sure about it. What's so interesting to me about lion's mane is some of the animal studies that show it can kind of counteract some of the damage from amyloid plaques, and these are kind of clumps in the brain that build up with Alzheimer's disease that kind of create dysfunction. So the fact that it can counteract and sort of ameliorate and help, even if they are there, is very interesting. But it's in animal data so
Yeah,
far.
we
So I
need
think
human, right?
my take home for that is, look, if you want to try it on an individual basis and you've got your doctor sign off, your dietitian sign off, maybe your pharmacist sign off, it's not going to do anything strange with your meds, go for it. And if it
Right.
works for you, amazing. But across the board, I wouldn't feel comfortable saying, hey, everyone should do this.
And what about, so again, I'm sure you feel the same, like ginkgo biloba, there's all this conversation about that, and cognition. Also, I've heard about creatine for it, creatinine, however
Yeah.
you pronounce it, caffeine and L-theanine. I don't, the only one that
Yeah.
and maybe it's because I had them on my podcast and I really listened to what they had to say. I don't know. But your take is the six pillars is what we really know. And right now in the supplement space, besides maybe a multivitamin, there's really nothing with the science as of yet in humans to
Yes.
support the benefit.
Or it's really early, like ginkgo, we see antioxidant activity, blood flow improvement, which should improve nutrient and oxygen delivery to the brain. So that is good. But the studies are small and they're mixed.
Okay.
Um, Caffeine and L-theanine show up together in green tea for that alert, calm state of mind, which I just want to believe that's true because I feel it. But do we and what's the harm of recommending a green tea to most people? So I
Right.
think those are nice. Whether I want it in a pill is different. And then creatine, saving the best for last because creatine is everywhere and it's so popular and of course has been so studied for athletic performance.
Right, which is
But
different than aging
yes,
brain.
that's right. Yeah, maybe it helps with the muscles as we age, and that's good. But with the brain, the data just isn't there yet. What we know is that there are a few rare diseases that are inborn where people are not able to either create or transport creatine. And in those cases, they're
Okay.
going to have brain deficits, brain development issues where creatine supplement is kind of prescribed. But in
Okay.
general, for age-related cognitive decline, the data's too early for me to recommend across the board. I'm watching that space
Right.
though.
Cool. What about, though, we mentioned omega 3s early in the diet. What about, is that needed if somebody's saying, well, I don't eat fish, and I know we spoke about the plant based, but they're like, I'm not getting enough of that either. Would you
hmm
recommend an omega 3 supplement?
You know, potentially, because
Okay.
when we talk about supplements, it's like, where are we starting from? Are you starting from you're not getting any omega-3s? Then maybe, can I get you to eat fish? Can I get you to eat,
Right.
walnuts or something? That's where I'm going to start. But if they absolutely are starting from zero, maybe. And then I'm going
Okay.
to want to make sure that it's been third party tested by
Of
like an
course.
NSF or some
Right.
kind of
Yes.
credible organization. I'm going to want to
Right.
make sure it's a brand that I trust.
Right. Of
Um,
course. Before we recommend supplements to anyone. Of
all of
course.
that.
Of course. Uh, if somebody is on their way and they're starting to get plaque, which do we really know if we have plaque in our brain? Is there a way to reverse, or is everything that we're discussing is really more about prevention?
Well, it is clearly squared in the prevention space. However, it's never too late, which I think is kind of where the question's going. It's never too
Yes.
late to start doing things that are going to support brain health. There is interesting data on uh, plaques in the brain showing up, but they're still being a protective factor from diet. So even with the signs of Alzheimer's, the physical signs of Alzheimer's on the brain, those people with a diet that was closer to the mind diet, they were they had preserved more of their cognition. So
Okay.
functionally, they were doing better despite these physical
They
signs.
didn't decline as quickly, let's say, as somebody else.
Correct.
Now, is there, though, just like with, let's say, cholesterol, a genetic component? Like, no matter what you do, your cholesterol is going to be high. And just to throw it out there, is there, no matter what you do, and you tell me. I kind of feel like I have my own answer, but I want to hear it from you. Is
Sure.
is there a genetic component to dementia? And if so, is it inevitable? Like the same way, I mean, I take cholesterol medication and I have a very plant-based, well-balanced, but both my parents had high cholesterol. No matter what I do dietary-wise, exercise, blah, blah, my cholesterol is high. So is it kind of the same, though? Could it be that no matter what people do, if they're going to get dementia, they're going to get dementia?
No way. No way. No way.
Oh, I love you. Okay.
Like by far and away, what we can do outweighs the genetic risk. Yes,
Okay.
there is a marker. People may have heard of the LLL. ApoE4, which is a marker that increases risk. If you have two of those markers from mom and dad, it increases your risk. But it does not mean that you will inevitably develop at all. One thing is perhaps if there's early onset
Right. That's
dementia, then
different. Right.
we want to watch that closer. But if it's an age-related
Right.
thing,
Okay.
even with the genetic marker, there are so many things you can do to prevent that. I work with a neurologist who has double risk on both sides of her family, and anyway, she's doing great so far. So,
All right. But yeah, so
yes,
it's different if it's early onset, though, right? That's what I thought.
yeah,
Okay. So if it's age related, all right. I have years to start worrying. All right. So I'm not going to worry.
don't worry. You need to manage your stress. That's
I
one
need
of
to
the
manage my
six
stress.
pillars.
No, I'm not worried. I'm actually not worried, and I'm doing everything I can, and hopefully my listeners will as well. And I think the gist of it, which is so wonderful, Maggie, is that the mind diet. I mean, yes, wonderful for your mind, but like you so beautifully said earlier, but it's for the entire body. I mean, let's not forget, we're just not a brain. I mean, we have an entire body that functions, that does lots of different things, right?
Totally right. Couldn't
Can't
have said it
argue,
better
right?
myself. Nope.
There's
Great.
nothing to argue there. Oh my God, I love it. Is there anything else that you think we missed that is just like you really feel like if people did this or were aware of that it would help? Or do you think we kind of covered what we needed to?
We covered so much great stuff. I want to give people something actionable though. So
Oh,
I
I
would
love
say,
that. Actionable is great.
yes,
Yes.
let's do this. So diet diversity is the name of the game. So I would challenge everyone to try to have at least 5 different plants at every meal that they eat. And then if that's easy, go to 10, go to
Five
15.
different
Try that.
plants. Wait, 5 different plants at one meal.
Herbs and spices count.
Oh, okay,
Olive
fine.
oil comes from a plant.
Oh my
So
God.
all these plant
See,
foods.
even I needed to think that through. All right. Yes, I love that idea. All right. And everyone hopefully will report in and tell us how they did. Maggie, thank you so much for joining me.
Great conversation. Thank you, Keri.
You're welcome.